Hi everybody, welcome to the tutorial where I'll show you how we modeled the birdhouse together in the first day of class together. So I got Blender open here. So when we open Blender, it should show our default scene that looks something like this. If you don't have Blender installed on your machine already, just remember that you can download it from blender.org. And it is available on PC, Mac, and Linux. So you should be able to install it on your computer, as long as it's not a tablet or something special like that. So if you don't have it installed, install it already and open it up, and you should be brought to a screen that looks like this. Might have like a little artistic pop-up screen that's like in the middle. Just click somewhere off to the side to make that disappear, and then it should look identical to what my screen looks like. So we'll model the birdhouse together in this video. It should be a little bit easier to follow along since this time there'll be a pause button, and you can put this on HD mode in the YouTube window. Just click 1080p. It'll be a little bit easier to follow along. Also, to aid to guide you a little bit, I will put on this little mod, which will, if you notice here in the bottom left hand corner of the screen, there's a little display of which mouse buttons I am pressing as I press them, as well as what keys on the keyboard I am pressing as I'm pressing them. So if for whatever reason I forget to call out what key I'm pressing as I'm pressing them, those will be there, but I will try my best to call them out. So without further ado, right off the bat, I'm just going to go over some camera controls real quickly, just to reiterate a little bit, as well as some of our basic movement and stuff. So first things first, just remember that on the number pad on the far right of our keyboard, you can hit the 1 key to go into a front view, a perfect front view perspective of our cube. And 3 will put us in a right view, and 7 brings us in a top view or a bird's eye view of our cube. So front, top, and right view are my most common perspectives that I'm modeling personally. So those are very common perspectives that you will use most likely, and it's also nice sometimes to rotate around your perspective and get kind of a artistic look at things. So you can always middle mouse click and hold your middle mouse button and drag your mouse to rotate your perspective in a whatever angle you want to view it at. And of course, you can always snap back to a front, a side, or a top angle if you want to, just by pressing any of those number pad keys that we described. So the major types of movements you can do to any sort of object or sub-object are a grab and move, so a movement, a rotation, or a scale. A movement, which looks like this, a rotation, which looks like this, and a scale, which looks like that. So, which is, it's just what it sounds like. So if you right click something, an object, whether it's a light source or a cube or, a smaller part of the cube, an aspect of the cube, if you right click select anything and you hit G, you have designated to Blender that you want to grab a hold of your currently selected thing and you intend on moving it. Now, after you hit G, where you actually move that selected object depends on a couple of things. If you don't designate an axis of movement, where you move that object will depend on your perspective. So for instance, because if you look in the top left corner, because I'm currently in a top perspective, or also known as I hit 7 on the keypad, that's the top perspective shortcut key. Because I'm in a top perspective of this cube, hitting G while having the cube selected Well, I'm pretty much constrained to moving the cube forward, back, left, and right, just because that's what makes sense in the current perspective. And in the same way, if I am in a front view, so I just hit 1 on the keypad. If I'm in a front view and I hit G for grab with the cube selected, and I start moving my mouse, I'm pretty much locked in a plane of left, right, and up and down movement, because that's the kind of logical plane of movement when I'm viewing it at a front on angle. So if you don't want to be constrained by the perspective that you're viewing your cube, so like say I clicked my middle mouse button and I was like, I rotated my view, clicked and dragged my middle mouse button. Say I'm looking at my cube like this and I'm like, well, I want to move my cube, and I do want to move it along the y-axis. You can either hit G for grab, followed by Y for y-axis, and that will constrain it to the y-axis, to where you can then left click to finalize that movement, if you'd like. Or you can simply just grab a hold of this green arrow, which is the y-axis transform handle, and you can drag that handle to just move it sort of manually. So you can do it both ways. But if you do it the way of hitting G, you do have to left click to finalize the position. So you move your mouse somewhere and you do have to left click eventually. If you hit right click, it'll just snap it back to its original spot. So in the same way that you do the grab and move, you can also do the R for the rotate, and the same rules apply. You rotate given a certain axis, so you can rotate among the Z, so you can hit R followed by Z, and you are rotating on the Z axis. I just right click to cancel it because I'm only doing this for example. Or you can do R then X, because that would be a rotation on the X axis. But if I hit R and don't designate an axis, because I'm in a front perspective view, my rotation is sort of it is logically constrained to the front view, which is it's kind of just going to naturally fall into rotating it on the y-axis, which is not to overly confuse you, but just remember that Blender flips the y and the z axes. In any sort of traditional mathematics, the y-axis is going to be the up and down axes, and z is going to be forward and back, but Blender has those two axes flipped, so the y is actually forward and back in Blender. So that is sort of a tricky thing to wrap your head around, and Blender does tend to confuse people in that regard, but just something to get used to. So yeah, you can rotate among specific axes, whatever you choose. So I recommend you play with all those tools, and oh yeah, and then scale. So you can also hit, in the same way that you can hit G for grab, do a movement in a specific axis or an undesignated axis, undefined, just perspective designated axes. So you can also do a scale. If you just do a regular scale by hitting S with something selected, it will uniformly scale it in all directions. However, if you hit S followed by an axis letter such as X, it will stretch it in whatever axis that you just designated. And you can either left click to accept that change, or you can just right click to let go of that change and cancel it. So yeah, I suggest playing around with those things. This is I should have actually just gone over this like I just did when I did in class, which I apologize for not doing it this way initially. Funny enough, the first class I taught before you guys, I had decided in my head that it was too structured. So day one with you guys, I actually came to class without a plan. Like I didn't have a syllabus this time because I felt the first class was too structured and I didn't give the students enough freedom. But in a sense, the pendulum swung too far in the other direction this time, and I had no plan, so I was very scattered. So because of the lack of structure, I forgot to cover the really basic, fundamental, important three transform things, which is movement, rotation, and scale. Those are the two major things, and you can always remember it is G for grab, R for rotate, and S for scale. So those are, if you could write those three things down, and then just remember that you can always use those three things in accordance with the X or Y or Z axes. Those three things will help you go far. And then it's a matter of getting used to the camera controls and stuff on top of that. So without further ado, actually, in case any of us managed to screw up the default scene, which I know I did and I'm sure many of you did, let's just hit File, New at the top here, just to get a fresh start so we can start the Birdhouse thing with minimal hiccups. So let's do New, File, New, and then click Reload Startup File. And we should bring us to a new default scene, which is what we want. So first thing we want to do is hit 1 on the keypad to bring us to a front view, and then hit 5 on the keypad to bring us to a front ortho view. And it'll say front ortho in the top left hand corner. Now we want to hit tab to go into edit mode. There's two ways to go in from into edit mode. You can either click this button down here where my mouse cursor is and go from object mode into edit mode, or you can just simply hit tab. And I like to give you the option, but either way, just make sure you click this button, go into edit mode if you're not already. So if you're in object mode, just click edit mode. But just also remember that the tab key on your keyboard will also do the same thing, and it is faster if you can get used to doing it. And I'm going to go over a quick concept here just to make things a little bit faster in the long run, in the long term. This little button that my cursor is over right here, this is called the limit selection to visible. Let's uncheck this. You can uncheck it, but I'm not going to uncheck it. You guys go ahead and uncheck it so it is lighter as opposed to darker. But I'm going to leave it checked so I can just demonstrate what it does to you. If I don't uncheck this, if I'm going to try to select the entire top 4 vertices of this cube, which I'm going to do by doing that little box select thing, by hitting B, left clicking and dragging the top, watch what happens. Well, I did a box selection of the top parts, and you would think logically it would select the entire top part of the cube. But when I rotate my view with the middle mouse button clicking and holding and drag, you could see it only selected the front 2 corners that were facing the camera. That's because we are working in a perfect user or a perfect front orthographic view, and the 2 corners that are directly behind these 2 corners are technically not visible. They're precisely immediately and mathematically behind these 2 front vertices, and therefore are not visible, and therefore were not selected. So that button that you deselected, what that does for you is if you're actually in a solid mode, if you deselect that, that doesn't limit your selection to what's visible. It will select things that are behind geometry that is in the way of stuff. So now when I hit B and then left click and hold my left mouse button, drag my mouse, and then let go, and then I can rotate my view a little bit. You can see that selected all of them. Actually, I just realized my little visual add-on just stopped showing my little buttons, so I'm going to turn that back on. There you go. That's just a little thing for you guys. So now you can see my little mouse buttons being pressed there in the corner. So yeah, it just makes it so I can select elements of this cube through the cube and not have to worry whether I am in solid mode or wireframe mode. Because if you remember when we were doing this exercise in class, I kept on having to have you change between wireframe mode and solid mode. That was because this back face, or this only visible option, was keeping us from selecting everything that we needed to. So now that we have that deselected, or it's a lighter color, we don't need to worry about things not being selected behind it. So that's a good thing. So we want to we actually want to be in the face sub-object level of this cube. Right now we're in vertex mode. So everybody hits it 1 on your keypad, and let's click this button right here that says face select. It has a cube with an orange side to it. Another quick way of switching your sub-object level, your selection mode, is just simply holding Control, and while holding Control, hit Tab, and then you can select face, and that will change your mesh select mode to face. It's just another way of doing the same thing. And we just want to make sure that that top face is selected, which it is. As a side note, having these top 4 vertices selected is actually the same thing as having this top face selected. It's an identical thing, but it's just a good thing to be working in face mode right now, because it's easier, because then we're not worrying about deselecting a single vertex and then having everything going haywire. So gonna hit 1 on the keypad, go back to this front view, and let's hit E for extrude. And then we can move our mouse cursor up a little bit, maybe about this high. Doesn't matter to be exact, just relatively. And about there, and I'm gonna left click to finalize the placement of the extrusion. And if you middle mouse click and hold your middle mouse button, drag it down a little bit and to the right, you can kind of see what you did. Now let's go back into vertex select mode, because we need to merge these front 2 vertices as well as the back 2 vertices to make the pointed roof shape. So we're going to go back down here to this button and click this one where my mouse cursor is, vertex select mode. And just remember, you could always hold Control and hit Tab and do vertex. Just another way of doing it. And just remember the A key. If you have a selection and you want to select nothing, if you have something selected at all and you hit A will make you deselect what you have selected so that nothing is selected, and that's what we want. So hit A. So nothing is orange, and that's what we want, because we want a fresh selection. So we want to right click any of the 2 front vertices, so I'll select the front left one, and then hold shift, and while holding shift we're going to right click the front right one. Now we can hit W which might just be W for weld. I'm not sure what W stands for, but now we can hit the merge right here, this merge option, and then we're going to click at center because we want to merge these 2 points into a single point at the average center point between them. And that's good. Now we just need to do the same thing to these 2 back points. And remember, the A key deselected our current selection, so we want to hit A again to deselect this current vertex. So just hit A. Now nothing is, nothing is selected now. So now I can right click one of the back 2 ones. I'll select the back left, hold shift, and while holding shift, I'm going to right click the other one and then hit W, click merge, and then at center. Now I'm going to go back into a face select mode. So I'm going to take the hotkey route to this route instead of clicking the button down here. So hold Control, and while holding Control, hit Tab. Little menu comes up, and this little menu you want to click Face. And the 2 faces you want to select are this one. So right click this face, and then hold shift, and then right click the other slanted face. And we want to extrude while in a front view because it's just easier to visualize. So hit 1 on the keypad, and then we can get a better idea of our extrusion. So we want to extrude it, so we're going to hit E for extrude. And it should automatically sort of just extrude upward. And how far we extrude upward is going to determine the thickness of the eave of our birdhouse. So I'm going to designate our eave to be this tall and left click to finalize that. Now, I have a idea of what we could do to kind of make things a little bit easier. Just an idea. Let's go into the vertex sub-object level again of things now that we've extruded things here. So go back down to this this button here. Conversely, you could just hold Control and hit Tab. Either one does the job, but I'll do the button this time. Just change it up. So I'm going to go into vertex select mode. And I'm going to hit, because I have a selection here that I don't want, I'm just going to hit A to deselect all. So nothing is orange, nothing is selected. And I'm going to hit B for a box select. So notice how this never-ending crosshair appears. And I'm going to take a close look at what I'm going to select here. I'm going to start my click right about here. So my left click, I'm going to click and hold my left mouse button right about here and drag just so I'm going to encompass these 2 corner vertices. But it's also going to select some back verts that are directly behind those. If you get what I'm saying. Like I'm going to rotate my camera just so you can see. It also selects some back there. So if you want to make sure that you select the correct ones, you can also just rotate your camera perspective by clicking your middle mouse button in and dragging your mouse, and just make sure that you have these correct vertices selected in the end. But yeah, those are the verts that we want to select. I'm going to hit 1 to go back into a front ortho view, and let's try hitting S for scale, followed by X for x-axis. And move it to about there, and then left click, and then we're going to hit G followed by Z for z-axis until we get something like that. So we kind of have like an angled like an already angled thing going for it. And the reason I'm doing it this way this time, I just left click to finalize the movement, the grab movement of the vertices. The reason I'm doing it this way is now let's go back into face select mode. If we go into face select mode and when we do this this Eve extrusion now, so if I remember, you can just I just click this little button here to go back into face select sub-object level mode. If you middle mouse click and hold your middle mouse button, drag your mouse until you can see this little bottom little Eve polygon. Select that one and try hitting E. It actually goes down a little bit, which is surprising. It's not perfectly in line with the rest of the roof, but that's more of a lack of, you know, my eyeballing it exactly, like the angle being lined up perfectly. But notice how any extrusion you make is going to be perpendicular to the, it's going to be from the normal of the polygon. So basically what a normal is if you could think of a line tangent to the center of the polygon, or tangent to the surface, or like perpendicular to the surface. Let me see if there's a way I could visualize this. I know there is a way to show normals. If I can't come up with the option quickly, I won't spend too much time trying to find it. But if I could show it quickly, I'll do it. Well, if you can imagine a straight line perfectly intersecting this polygon at a 90-degree angle, that would be the normal of it. So any extrusion of a selected polygon, that polygon is going to extrude at the normal direction of that said polygon. So that's what's going on with the roof eave. So yeah, so that just means that this polygon here wasn't pointing in a perfect angle relative to here. So that's why it kind of bends downward right at this point. But if I better matched it up, it would look better. So you can do the other ones separately. You can also put in exact value. So if I wanted to do like E for extrude followed by typing like 1 or like point, oops, whoa. If I wanted to do E for extrude followed by like 0.25, 0.25 is like a better number. Maybe like 0.35 would be a good number. E 0.35. You can always put in a number as a value after pretty much any sort of transform, like a scale or a movement or any type of thing that you can do to something. A scale, a movement, a rotation, any number that you put in will correspond to what you just told you want Blender to do to something. So extrude is no different. I just told Blender to extrude this polygon 0.35 units in whatever direction was natural to that polygon, which was kind of like a downward, almost 45-degree angle. So I'll do the same thing to the other polygon just to make it uniform. So E 0.35, enter to finalize it. I could have also left clicked instead of enter. I believe it would have done the same thing. So I just right click this polygon to select it. E for extrude, type in 0.35 because that's just a good value, it seems. Let me see, left click. Yeah, left click does the same thing as enter. So enter and left click you can use interchangeably to finalize the extrusion. Same thing, same concept. So that looks decently okay. And all right, so what I'm gonna do now is we want to select these polygons that you see here on my screen on both sides of the birdhouse. So what I want you to do is just to right click the ones that you see here on your screen. So just hit 1 on your keypad and right click the first one and then hold shift and start right clicking the other ones that you see. Just these ones on the inside, because these are the ones that you want to extrude. You don't need to click any of the top ones or the ones underneath, just these inner ones until they're all orange and selected. And then just middle mouse click and hold and drag your mouse and drag and rotate your perspective until you see the other side. And I can see here that I have these 2 polygons selected, so I only need to select these other 2 ones. So I need to hold shift again, so put my shift key back down. Otherwise, if I start right clicking again, I will deselect all of my other selections. So I need to continue holding shift again to add to the selection without losing what I already have selected. So press shift and hold it and right click this, and I have selected what I need. And because I'm going to be making an extrusion in the forward and back direction, just logically I'm going to want to be in a top view. And so pressing 7 on the keypad will bring me into a top view, and this is where we get to the point where we're going to be doing an extrusion followed by a scale in a certain axis. So if you remember before, what we did is we hit E for extrude, and then we right clicked immediately to let go of the extrusion. Because if we don't right click, we are at the mercy of Blender telling us where it wants us to extrude, like what direction we want to extrude in. We're saying, no, we don't want to extrude in your set direction. We're going to designate where we want to extrude these selected polygons, because in fact, we want these selected polygons to extrude outwards from this current center point. And we are going to scale it outwards in the y-axis. So let's hit S followed by Y for y-axis. So we are simply just scaling our selected extruded geometry. We're scaling it in the y-axis, and we want to move it, you can move it as far out as you want. This is just how far out it's going to hang out over the front and back of the house, the little eave. So it could be this much, doesn't really matter. You can choose however much you want and left click to finalize that. So I'll choose about that and left click. And you can rotate your camera. Remember the middle mouse button, holding that and dragging it, you can kind of look around and see how it looks. And yeah, looks pretty nice so far. So, and so this little birdhouse object, this is in fact a single object. This entire highlighted orange thing, this is now considered a single object, which, believe it or not, I just went from edit mode to object mode by hitting tab, or you can just hit this button and go to object mode, just in case you're wondering. So go to object mode right now down here where this button is. Blender recognizes this selected object, this little house object, as cube. That's what it calls it, because it actually started out as a cube. and it is a single object that's just been repeatedly transformed and extruded in so many different ways that it's no longer, it's no longer a cube anymore, but something a little bit more abstract. And that's where the power of a sub-object level modeling program is you can edit those finer parts of your primitives. Basically, a cube, a sphere, a cone, a pyramid, all those are called primitives. They're basic geometric shapes that you can use as a starting point to model whatever objects you're looking to make. So when we made this birdhouse together, I had made you add the cylinder, the little peg to the birdhouse as part of the object of the birdhouse itself, which was a mistake. The better way actually would have been making the cylinder its own object that you can manipulate on its own. There's a lot of benefits to doing it that way, and it's a lot less complicated, and it's just the better way of doing it. So that's why we're in object mode right now, is so we can treat the little bird perch as a separate object. So here's what we're going to do. Probably by now everybody's 3D cursor, this little thing that you can kind of left click all over the place, probably your cursor has gotten thrown around the screen at some point. So just remember, you can hold Shift and hit S to bring up this menu. Just click cursor to center, and that's going to throw your 3D cursor to the middle of the screen, which is what we want. And let's hit Z on the keyboard to go into wireframe mode, because we're about to add a cylinder to our scene, and we're not going to see it initially because it's going to be directly inside of the birdhouse, which will be fine. But to add a cylinder, you can do one of two things. You can either go up here at the top of the screen where it says Add, go to Add, click Add, go to Mesh, and then click Cylinder. You can do it that way, or if you like hotkeys, you can just hold Shift and hit A, and then it brings up the menu here on the screen, and then you can click Cylinder. I prefer the hotkey way. It's a little bit faster for me personally, but you can do either way and it's the exact same thing. So I also like to be in the habit of adding new shapes while I'm in a perfect view, such as a front, a right, or a top view. It's a good habit to be in because every once in a while it will cause problems if you are adding an object in a weird view, such as like one of these views, like a user-defined view. So let's actually just go to a top view by hitting 7, hold Shift, and hit A to bring up the menu. And again, you could always go to Add, Mesh, and add to cylinder. So we want to add this cylinder, and if you rotate your camera, remember with the middle mouse button clicking, holding, and dragging, you can see this cylinder is huge and inside our birdhouse. This will be eventually our little bird perch. So first thing we're going to do actually is let's hit 1 on the keypad, and let's scale it in the Z-axis, just to establish that this is going to be a long perch. So let's hit S, then Z, and just scale it to be nice and tall. And however tall you want it to be, and left click to make it nice and tall. Then let's hit 3 on the keypad, so that we're viewing the birdhouse from a right view. And I'm gonna scroll my my mouse wheel out, like scroll my mouse wheel down to zoom my camera out a little bit, just so I can see how tall this giant cylinder is in relation to the birdhouse. Now the cylinder is still oriented up and down, and it needs to be left and right because it's a bird perch and not a totem pole. So it does need to be rotated 90 degrees relative to the current view that I'm in. So all I need to do is type R for rotate and then 90 for 90 degrees. And then followed by enter or left click would do the same thing. And yeah, now it's oriented properly, but it is too wide. It's actually too everything. It's too wide and it's too long. So let's first just do a uniform scale by hitting S and not designating any axes of scaling. Let's just scale it down in all axes by hitting S. So scale it down to where the length is somewhat realistic, but the yeah, okay. So right there, the length is pretty is going to be pretty reasonable, but the width is still kind of off. And at this point, I don't really care to hit G for grab. I do need to move this in the Y direction. I need to move it to the left. And just remember, I'm viewing this birdhouse from the right side view, so this peg needs to be over here. So I simply just left clicked this green arrow, held it down, and drag this peg just so it's slightly inside the wall, just like this. Alright, so that's good. Now, I do like the length of this peg. Like, the length is about what I want it to be. And actually, let's move this down a little bit, because it's a little, if we have a bird that's any taller than an average bird, it's going to be bumping its head on the top. So I'm going to move this peg, just left click this up and down arrow, just like we left click the other one, hold it, and drag this down. There you go. Now, while this peg is the correct length in terms of left and right, it is a little bit wide. So if we want to scale this peg in the in its thickness, but not its length, we basically want to scale it in every axis except for Y. To scale an object in every axis but exclude one single axis, all you do is, so in the case of this peg, we just want to exclude Y. We hit S for scale, but then after that we hold shift, and while holding shift we hit Y. And now we've designated that we want to do a scale that will uniformly scale our Z and X axes, so we're not going to get any sort of oval shape to the ends, like the caps of our cylinder, but we're not going to stretch the length of our cylinder at the same time, if that makes any sense. So we can get a nice sort of like nice perfect cylinder thickness, which that's about kind of what I'm looking for. Right about that is pretty good. Yeah, so that's pretty nice. So if we hit Z to go back into solid mode, and then middle mouse click and hold and drag, we can kind of rotate our viewport, kind of scroll our mouse in and out and zoom in, kind of look at it from all angles. That looks just about right. And really the only thing that this is missing at this point is just the fact that the birdhouse is hollow. Like, this is like a decoy birdhouse that would thoroughly disappoint birds that would, you know, approach it. It'd be like a bad version of a bird mirage. So we need to make it hollow. So I'm going to introduce something new in Blender here, like a new panel, which is called the modifier panel. So first thing first, let's hit 1 on the keypad and go into a front ortho view. Also, let's hit A. Let's hit A as many times as we need to make sure nothing is selected. So just hit the A key until nothing is highlighted in orange. So the most times you'll have to hit A is twice, technically, but just make sure nothing's highlighted in orange. So just whatever. There you go. Nothing's highlighted in orange. Also, if you have to get that 3D cursor back in the center, just remember hold shift and hit S, cursor to center, because we want that cursor to be at the center, because we're going to add another cube to the scene. So we're going to go to this add menu at the top of the screen, go to mesh, and left click cube. Let's hit Z for wireframe, just so we can see the relative size of the cube we just added to the outer walls of the birdhouse, so we know exactly what we are adding here. So we want to just do a uniform scale right off the bat, because the walls need to have thickness. Basically, this cube is going to designate the area inside of this this solid birdhouse that is going to be chiseled away. You could think of it as. So we're going to hit S for scale, and scale it inwards maybe about this much, and left click to finalize. And the distance between, say, like if you look at my mouse cursor here and here, would be like the distance, like would be the thickness of the wood or the walls in this birdhouse, if you could kind of visualize now what's going on. So now, if you really want to go for a level of realism in this birdhouse, which I don't know why you'd want to, but it would be a good practice, so we're going to do it. We're going to do the same thing as far as extruding the triangular roof. So these birds are going to have a hyper-realistic triangular roof. So they're not just going to have a square roof on the inside, they're also going to have a triangular roof on the inside. So what we're going to do is, with this square, this cube that we have inside here still selected, we're going to hit tab, the tab key on the left of the keyboard, to go into edit mode. Make sure that we're in edit mode down here. If you're not, you can always just click this button and go into edit mode. Just make sure you're in edit mode, and hit A to make sure nothing is selected. So just deselect everything, and so nothing is orange. And make sure that you're in face select mode if you're not. So it'd be this far right button of these three down here. So this button right here is the one that you want to be in. And right click this top face. So this guy right here. So make sure you're in the front ortho view by pressing 1 on the keypad. And this is the face that we want to have selected. So when you have right click this face and have it selected, hit E for extrude, and bring your mouse cursor to bring it up to about right here, and left click to finalize it. The reason I brought it up right here is because this point right here basically is where these 2 points are going to merge, and about here to here is about the thickness between here and here, so it's going to be relatively the same. So at this point, I want to go back into vertex select mode, because we're going to do some vertex merging just as we did with the initial birdhouse. So we got to go back down to these buttons and click the leftmost button, which is vertex select. Left click that. We also want to select nothing because we have an orange selection here. So hit A to deselect. And let's middle mouse click and hold and drag our mouse cursor down just a little bit so we can get some perspective. And you can see these front 2 verts and these back 2 verts, which we need to merge the front 2 verts together and the back 2. So start by right clicking one of the first front 2 verts, by right clicking one of the first and holding shift and right clicking the other, and then hitting W, left click the merge button, and then left click at center. And then we want to do the same to the back 2, but don't do that before deselecting this current selection. So hit A to deselect that current vert that's selected, and right click the one of the back two verts. Doesn't matter which one's first, just as long as it's one of the two correct ones. And hold shift and then right click the other one. Then hit W and click merge at center. Now let's hit tab and go back into object mode. The nice thing about the way we had things is this inner let's call this a brush. This brush basically, this deletion brush, this tool that we're using to delete space from within this larger birdhouse object is they're separate objects. So when we were in edit mode within this one object here, this inner part, we had no ability to affect the outer birdhouse mesh because it's a different object. Like, just for visualization, don't do any of this stuff I'm doing on my screen, but this thing right here, that I'm moving around my screen is known as cube.001, and this thing right here is just known as cube. So if I'm working inside edit mode in cube.001, there is no way I can affect the vertices or the faces or the edges of another object. And that's why it's nice to do things in separate objects, so I'm not like affecting this cylinder down here or anything. I can always designate what object I'm working under, which is a really nice thing with Blender. So I'm gonna go back into wireframe mode by hitting Z, so it's it can be nice and clear what things I am selecting here. So when I'm in the front view, by pressing 1 on the keypad, you can clearly see I have 3 objects in my scene. This is the visible outer birdhouse. This is the space from inside the birdhouse that I want to delete, and this is the perch. There's one thing missing. There's one little fine detail, which is the inner part. It doesn't quite match the shape perfectly. Like it gets a little bit bigger right here. Like the ceiling is a little bit thicker right here than it is up here. And I can fix that simply by raising these vertices on the deletion, the inner deletion brush, just raising them up a little bit. So if I select this, if I right click, select this inner part, this object cube.001, which is our deletion thing, go into edit mode, and I just simply hit A to deselect everything. I hit B, left click and hold, drag, and select these, let go, and then hit G followed by Z for Z axis. I can move this up until I get a nice uniform thickness. Notice how when they're right here, I'm gonna left click and finalize that. Notice how right here, there's a nice uniform thickness right here all the way through, and it looks just that much better. It's just the fine little details that you can kind of notice in your models that really make all the big differences. And that's why I'm showing you these details. It's not groundbreaking, but the more you notice little tiny granular details like that, it's just nice. So I'm just going to tab out of this, hit tab to get into edit mode again, and we're ready to delete this inner space to make this hollow. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do something called a Boolean option, or a Boolean operation. The way we need to do that is, the logic is we select the object that we want to chisel area out of, which is this object right here. So we need to be in object mode to work in the object level, right? We're working with these large chunks as opposed to sub-objects. So we want to select this large birdhouse, and we want to delete this from this. So we want to select the object that we want to be deleted from. So we select the outer, which is this. So right click the big birdhouse, so it's nice and orange and highlighted. And over here where my mouse cursor wanders off to, in this panel up here, you might have to scroll your middle mouse wheel down to be able to see it. But if you go to the right for far enough, you'll see this little blue wrench where if you mouse over it, it says Object Modifiers. This is called the Modifiers panel. Left click it, and you'll simply see a button that says Add Modifier, which is what you want to left click. And this is where Blender gives you crazy amounts of functionality. And this is why Blender is very difficult to condense into a 3-day, let alone a 4-day class. 3D class, it'll be even more difficult, but I'll do my best. But yeah, what we want to use in particular, I recommend you experiment with all these and see what they do. It won't hurt anything, and there's so much fun stuff and artistic little fun modifiers that you can apply to any objects in your scene, whether they're spheres or cubes or birdhouses, whatever. But what we're particularly interested in is Boolean, which is here under Generate. It's the third one down. So we'll left click Boolean. And the operation we are interested in is difference. So we select difference. And if you remember, the name of the object that we want to delete from this space of this is called cube.001. So this object panel right here on the right, it's got this little button underneath. If you left click it, you get this little drop down menu, and you have two options. You have cylinder or cube.001. We want to delete cube.001 from the space, so we want to left click cube.001. And you can see the changes already occur in the viewport, which is absolutely fantastic. And I'm going to middle mouse click and drag my perspective camera around just to make sure it looks nice and clean and that it did its job perfectly. Because Boolean operations are very, very picky. If your mesh is not completely airtight, it will not work at all. And I mean at all. When I was first starting with Blender, I could not get Boolean to work. It took me I think around a year of using Blender to get my first Boolean to cleanly work. So right now, if your Boolean looks anything like this, like if it worked at all, pat yourself on the back. If you were able to follow along well enough to get this to work, you did a good job at following along and listening, because it is very difficult to make a airtight mesh that can just work well. Like, Boolean is a very picky function, and if you have a less than perfect thing, it just doesn't work. And actually, if I throw myself in a perspective camera, I can put my camera kind of inside here and see that it's gone hollow. So I know that it did its job fine. If you're in an orthographic camera, orthographic does not consider depth. So no matter how far you zoom into something, your camera will never penetrate the surface of the mesh. But remember, if you hit 5 on the keypad and you go into perspective mode, you can zoom in with your scroll wheel and actually kind of penetrate the walls of whatever object that you are working within, which is a kind of interesting effect that's going on here. Actually, this weird distortion that you're seeing here with these weird lines is something called Z-fighting, which is basically two polygons existing in the same space. and the graphics card in your computer doesn't know which one to render, so it's just like freaking out basically. So that's why you're seeing these weird lines and patterns. Just as a funny little nerd thing, if you see that in a video game, that means the artist was lazy and didn't model things the right way. Yeah, one of you in class in the back, you were talking to me about having actual cylinders merged into the surface of a mesh, as opposed to just being kind of just existing inside of it. Yeah, in certain cases that can cause Z fighting if you don't do it properly. So that's when you want to do things the right way versus just kind of mashing things together. So that's the kind of effects that doing it the wrong way can cause, that weird visual distortion. So we did the Boolean operation. It seems to be working well. It should look like that if things went perfect. And assuming they did, I'm just going to proceed with the assumption that they did. And if they didn't, don't beat yourself up over it. I don't expect anyone's Booleans to go perfectly. And if they did, it's only excellent. It's only extra, So so let's hit apply. What apply is going to do is it's just going to apply these let's see. I'm going to try something for a change. If you hit apply, just hit Control Z once, and then just hit Control Z as many times. And Control Z, I mean Z as in a zebra. Hit Control Z as many times as you need to for this part right here where it says apply, copy, and all this stuff to reappear. And I'm going to try something a little bit different that I've never tried before, because I still need to Boolean a cylindrical shaped hole for the bird to enter through. And whereas normally I'm used to doing it as a separate Boolean, but I'm just going to try stacking another Boolean modifier directly underneath the current one and see how Blender behaves. I'm sure it behaves exactly the same way, and it's actually probably a little bit better than doing it over and over. So let's try this. Let's hit 1 on the keypad to go into a front view. And if you're not in an ortho view, if you're in a front perspective view, hit 5 to go into ortho. Make sure you're in a front ortho view. And let's hit Z to go into a wireframe mode. Now, what we're going to do is actually, let's use this existing perch, this cylinder right here. We're just going to use this perch cylinder and duplicate it to create the deletion brush for our Boolean that's going to delete the hole that the bird will stick its head through. So what we're going to do is let's first just make sure that we're all in object mode and on the same page. So if you're not in object mode, go into object mode by clicking this button down here and click object mode. So make sure it says object mode, and make sure nothing is selected. So if anything is orange, just hit A until nothing is orange. This is basically the best way I can say it. And so if you're in a front view, you should be able to clearly see this circle right here, which is the peg, which is kind of facing you, or the bird perch. Right click it so it highlights in orange. And I'm gonna scroll my middle mouse wheel in. And at this point would be a good point to use my camera pan, which the pan tool is done by holding shift. Then while holding shift, middle mouse click and hold the middle mouse button down, and move my mouse while holding the shift and middle mouse button. And I can pan my camera back and center the perch kind of into the center of the viewport. And then I'll scroll my mouse down a little bit and get that into there. And just make sure that you're in the front ortho view. So if you're not, just hit 1 on the number pad again. That's above all most important. So right click this cylinder here, make sure it's highlighted in orange, and you're going to hold shift, and while holding shift, hit D for duplicate. Now notice I can kind of freehand just move this cylinder all about. We want to move it perfectly in the Z axis or up and down. So hit Z and we can move it constrained to the Z axis. Let's just move it to about right up here. And left click to finalize it right about there. Now let's just do a uniform scale in all directions, because this right here is just going to be a deletion brush, so we don't need to do anything too specific because it just needs to intersect the front wall of this this birdhouse far enough to make it all the way through the front wall and delete all that wood, so to speak. So let's hit just S for scale and move the mouse out away from the peg until it's about, this big. However big you think this hole should be for whatever bird you intend on having it enter. If you want the birds to kind of get choked by the birdhouse while entering it, you can make it nice and small so they kind of get trapped in it. You can make it nice and small like that, not much bigger than the peg that they stand on. So I'll make mine nice and big because I'm a bird fan. You can hear my parrots in the background, so I'm a bird guy. So I'll make mine nice and big for the nice Amazons of the this birdhouse, whoever chooses to enter. I'll left click and finalize the scale of this thing, but I'm not even sure what this is going to look like from a side view. So I'm just going to hit 3 on the keypad. And here's the thing. This is actually okay, because notice how this cylinder, it is huge, but it only intersects this front wall. It goes pretty far in, but it doesn't touch this back wall. And that should be your only criteria for this cylinder, because this cylinder's only purpose is to fully intersect this space right here. It needs to fully intersect this area right here, which it does that job. Because all that Boolean is going to do is reference this object and see how much of the area of this object it intersects. And this object right now, because we deleted this inner area right here, this inner area right here doesn't even exist in this object anymore. This little thickness area right here is the only part that exists now. So when we do an additional Boolean operation, this cylinder right here only intersects this little part here, which is what we want. If your cylinder happens to be long enough at this point to go through the back wall, or it starts to chisel into the back wall, simply grab this Y handle and drag it in a way so that it only just cuts through this front wall. Or you can just scale it in the Y by hitting S and then Y, whatever you need to do. But its only purpose is just to completely penetrate this front wall. Just remember that we're working in a right view. We're viewing the birdhouse from the right side. So this is a side view now. So a lot of the getting used to the 3D program is just getting used to the perspectives that you're viewing it in. And that's why it's valuable to alternate between wireframe and solid view a lot, is because wireframe can be tricky sometimes, but it can also be very helpful in terms of measurements and selections. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But right here, it's a lot easier to tell what you're looking at. So this big cylinder right here, you could think of it as like a big drill that's just going to drill a giant hole into it. Is really the best way to think of it. So hit 3 on your keypad. Hit Z for if you get into wireframe mode, whatever you need to do, hit Z however many times you need to do, and right click this object, this birdhouse, this object, you'll know you're selecting the right object because it'll just say cube as opposed to cube.001. And actually, let's right click this giant deletion cylinder and just take a note of what it's called. If you right click this giant cylinder that we want to delete from the birdhouse, notice that it's called cylinder.001. So now we know what the deletion object is called. So let's right click this birdhouse now, and let's go back to this modifier panel over here. Click add modifier again, click Boolean, and so added another Boolean modifier to the stack. So this is the one that we already did because you can see it says cube.001. So we've added another modifier to what is called the modifier stack. So it's doing this Boolean modifier, and now it's doing this Boolean modifier on top of that in that order. So this bottom one is the newly added one. So we need to change this button by left clicking this intersect and changing it to difference. So click difference, and then click this button underneath the word object and choose cylinder.001. And it looks like it does exactly what we need it to. Because now at this point, this is where we want to apply our modifier. So here, let's have faith that everything worked okay. And again, if it didn't work for you, it's okay. Booleans took me forever to get working okay. It took me the longest time. And if it even remotely worked at all, congratulations, you're a superstar. And I'm not even trying to be like ironic or funny. I really mean it. Booleans are picky like crazy. So hit apply on both these modifiers. And let's right click this cylinder, hit X for delete. X is the delete key. So if you right click an object and hit X, you are saying you want to delete it. So hit OK and delete. Right click this cylinder, hit X, then delete. Let's right click this inner deletion brush that we deleted from the inside of the birdhouse, hit X, delete. Now let's hit Z to go into solid mode. And now let's middle mouse click and drag our perspective. Or actually, I actually didn't want to delete that one cylinder. Oops. So you can control Z for zebra back. We didn't really want to delete this this cylinder right here because that was our perch. I kind of got carried away with the deleting of cylinders because I forgot what the point of it was. But that's our perch for our bird. So, but let's leave that one. But you can delete this little inner thing. So I'll right click and delete that one, but leave this thing here. But now we should be left with a nice birdhouse. Remember, our camera control for rotating is just middle mouse click and drag. I'm rotating around. And you can see what the weird Boolean modifier does when you are cutting weird holes into a flat surface. It creates these really long like polygons that kind of stretch to the corners. And that's normal. And that's why I recommend doing Boolean modifiers last to whatever project you're working on. If you're going to cut a hole in something, make it the last thing that you do to that something. So if you are making a violin and you're going to cut those weird squiggly holes into the the wooden wooden part of the violin, make the last part you do, because that's going to make things infinitely more messy for you. And if you haven't already defined the major shapes of whatever it is you're working on, it's just going to introduce a whole new layer of complexity. So yeah, at this point I should have something like this. Remember, you can change the color of any of these objects independently by simply right-clicking whichever object and adding a material to that object by going to this panel here. You might, depending on your screen's resolution, you might have to put your mouse cursor up at this bar and scroll your mouse wheel down until you see this little sphere button. You can left-click that. That's the material button. and then you can click this little rectangular bar of whiteness under the word diffuse. That will give you a color wheel that you can designate the color of your birdhouse. So I can move it around here and choose what color I want the house to be. And because this birdhouse object is a different object from the perch peg, the peg does not change its color with the rest of the house. If I want the peg to become the same object as the house, like if I want to join the object and the peg to become the same color as the house, what I do is I right click the peg first, and then I hold shift and then right click the birdhouse second, and then hold control and hit J. And what I've said is I said, all right, this perch right here, I want to join the perch to the house and take all the attributes of the house, whether it's the materials, the textures, or whatever, and apply it to the perch, as opposed to the other way around. And it's really dependent on the order that I selected them in. If I had selected the house first and joined it to the perch, the house would have inherited the texture and color properties of the perch, which was a gray, dull color, colorless, whatever. So that concludes this tutorial. If you have anything that resembles this, congratulations. I went over a kind of a ridiculous sort of level of detail just for the heck of it. So if you were able to stay interested, I am infinitely proud of you because yeah, I mean it's difficult to stay like on the same page basically, because it's very easy to let go of one single vertex and then have everything just be completely different from that point forward. And that's all it takes with Blender. Like that Boolean modifier can not work due to the goofiest of things, like one thing being different, and yeah, it'll be very picky. So I hope you guys managed to get something similar to this, or something satisfactory. And of course, remember, you can always at this point add other modifiers to this birdhouse object and see how it acts. So try adding a curve modifier and whatever, or I guess that would be a bad maybe a bad example, but there's some good simple deform does some really silly stuff. Bend is a pretty funny. Yeah, you can do some crazy modifiers in this panel, and you can always remove the modifier that you add just by hitting these little X buttons next to the modifiers that you add in the stack. So modifiers are a good modular way to mess up whatever you're working on and then change it right back. So you can always mess things up and then rechange it right back, and no consequences. Subdivision surface is another really weird thing, which if you learn to use it properly, you can do some really cool high detail stuff, but it's very difficult to learn how to use properly, so use at your discretion. So yeah, that should be enough to tools to play around with and have fun with, and I hope everyone had fun with this. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions or anything, or if you get caught up on any particular step of this tutorial, just let me know right away, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you for so much, and I hopefully will see you next week. Thanks.